Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Goldston, and I'm this year's Symposium Editor of the Wake Forest Journal of Business and Intellectual Property Law. Welcome to our Spring 2021 Symposium, Preparing for Disaster. Now, we will hear from our interactive keynote speaker, Catherine Osaro. Ms. Catherine Osaro is the Executive Director of NC Leaf, or the NC Legal Education Assistance Fund, and a Senior Staff Attorney and the Disaster Legal Services Program Director of the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center. Prior to joining the Pro Bono Resource Center and NC Leaf, Catherine spent 4 years working with the Middle District of North Carolina in Greensboro, where she clerked for Chief Judge William Osteen Jr. and Senior Judge Carlton Tilley. In addition, Catherine chaired the Middle District's Unity Enrichment Committee, or UEC. Before clerking, Catherine spent 2 years as a staff attorney at the NC School Board Association in Raleigh. Ms. Osaro was born in Ann Arbor, but has since relocated to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She earned her master's degree in education from Harvard University and then moved to Chapel Hill to attend law school and has remained here. Please join me in welcoming her. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Maurice, and thank you everyone for being here. We are going to spend an hour talking about something that has become my passion, which is, I guess, two passions, pro bono and encouraging you all to do pro bono, and then disaster legal services to educate you about those and see the intersection of both of them. I think that the opportunities are endless, and they are varied. So just no matter what your interest is in law or expertise that you have or things that you'd like to learn about, there is more than likely a role for you to help in disaster legal services. And with that, I will begin the presentation. So just a few things. I'm going to do a few questions via chat because I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. If we were in a room together, I would definitely be asking questions and talking to you all. So we'll do this as closely as we can. There'll be a few poll questions, and then throughout I have some videos. There's some news clips and other things about work that we've done that I think really hit home, though, who you're helping and why we're doing it. But a few of my questions I will do through the chat. So when that time comes, just I'll ask a question and I'll let you know and have you answer through the chat. And that's just, again, just to help for me make this a little bit more conversational. And then I also can be responsive to some of the things that you're thinking about. And last thing, if you have any just general questions, please put them in the chat. And at the end, I'll have my contact information. So feel free to reach out to me anytime. I will say that several times during this presentation. If you have questions about pro bono in general, if you have questions about disaster legal services, please reach out. And if you are trying to plan something, please reach out, because more than likely I've planned something like it and I would gladly help. And there's nothing proprietary about what I do. So I will gladly share any materials I have, anything I can do to help. My ultimate goal is to get as many attorneys and paralegals out there volunteering to help people in North Carolina. So thank you. And with that, we can begin. All right, so let's begin. So to give just a big overview of what I'm gonna do today, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about who I am and where I work, and then go from that to why pro bono. Why is pro bono important in North Carolina, which can be extrapolated to why it's important anywhere. A quick overview of disaster legal services, and then focus on 3 projects that the Pro Bono Resource Center has done around disasters to give you examples of what you can do and how. The 3 examples are very different projects from each other, so I think they just help to encourage creative thinking around how you can utilize and catalyze pro bono attorneys after and sometimes before a natural disaster, and then also talk about what their role is. So first of all, as Maurice said, I am from the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center. And this is a mouthful. It took me probably a year of working there to be able to get all this out. The Pro Bono Resource Center is a program of the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission. The commission is a commission of the North Carolina Supreme Court. So ultimately, the Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court is in charge of the work that we do, but there's many levels in between there. Oh, sorry, Maurice, I'll tell you when we're ready, but we can go on this one. And so currently, the Chief Justice is Chief Justice Paul Newby, who's just was recently took that office. Before that, it was Sherry Beasley, and then before that, when I first came in, it was Mark Martin. So we've had many different people in charge. So first of all, before I get into the nitty-gritty of this talk, in your chat, which I believe everybody has access to at the bottom, I'm hoping, my first question for you is this: putting disaster legal services aside, what is an issue that is near and dear to your heart that you would like to do pro bono in? You don't have to have any expertise in it, nothing like that, but what's something out there happening in the world that you think if you had the right tools, you would like to help with in a pro bono, using your legal expertise and help with pro bono? So put in the chat. I'm going to start, but I'd love to just see what other people are thinking, and make sure that you're doing it to everyone so we all can see it. Somebody else did housing just as I did. Domestic violence, adoption. Let's wait for a few more, but it's really helpful. Oh, somebody put hurricane relief. We will talk specifically about that. Bankruptcy, housing. Yeah, these are awesome. Tax. Okay. Yeah, keep putting them in while I'm talking, but I love seeing what people are thinking about, because as you can see, it's every area of law imaginable and every type of policy issue imaginable. One of the reasons I asked that question is because you can do it. So if there's something that you're interested in, and one of the reasons that we encourage people to do pro bono is it's a wonderful way to learn a new area of law. Depending on the programs that are out there, and one of the things I encourage you to look at when you are looking for programs and where to volunteer is to see if they have training. There are some programs where they're really looking for subject matter experts, and we'll talk about that because one of my programs is more like that, but many are not. And so this is an excellent way, especially as you get further into your career and you might feel that you've gone sort of narrow in your area of expertise, which is wonderful and can be great for your day-to-day work. But if you're interested in something else, pro bono is a wonderful way to learn those skills and kind of be able to dip your foot or toes in something else that's interesting to you. In addition, if there's just a national issue, like for example, as a result of COVID, a lot of people are very nervous about housing and a potential eviction crisis in the country. It might not be the kind of work that you do every day, but there are often programs where you can volunteer to help and do work on that. So it's also just a way to address issues that you know are important, but maybe your everyday work aren't necessarily directly tied to. All right, so for today's talk, we're going to talk about why is pro bono important in North Carolina. So this is a focus on unmet legal needs and how they are met by legal services and where there is a gap in that and how pro bono fits. Then we'll talk quickly about what disaster legal services are. And as you'll see, disaster legal services really can encompass almost everything that you guys named as issues that you're interested in. We're going to talk about the life cycle of unmet legal needs in a disaster, because there seems to be a standardized life cycle to them, which can be helpful for planning in the pro bono realm. And then we're going to focus on 3 specific projects, so you can see different ways to think about these issues and how you can harness, as I said, harnessing goodness, harnessing the volunteerism of attorneys and paralegals in North Carolina. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, my goal for this is really for you to leave this discussion with 2 things. One, to know that you can do pro bono. I'm sure a lot of you do, some of you don't, and that encourage you and really hope you get invigorated to do it. And then also to understand why pro bono is integral to disaster recovery in any state, North Carolina, of course, included. So now we're going to begin with unmet legal needs. Who is it that we're helping and why? Why is there a necessity for pro bono attorneys in North Carolina? Equal justice under the law is not merely a caption on the facade of the Supreme Court building, but is perhaps the most inspiring ideal of our society. And it is fundamental that justice should be the same in substance and in availability without regard to economic status. This former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell. So important. So no matter who you are, what your resources are, you should have access to justice in the quality of what it is and in the substance. The information that you are getting should be the same. And this is another incredibly important tenet of pro bono and of the Pro Bono Resource Center. All right, so who are we talking about? Who cannot afford justice in North Carolina? As you can imagine, generally, it is many people. And we're going to talk about, I will show you a few statistics of who we're talking about. But these statistics represent extremes. There's a huge swath of people in the middle who also can't afford justice. So just remember that. It's not an easy thing. All right, so who are the people? People who face discrimination and unfair disparity. It's groups that you'd often come to mind when you think of this. People of color, people who are disabled, women, seniors, all these different groups have issues of access to justice for many different reasons. Rates of poverty, difficulty with having to manage jobs and other responsibilities and trying to mix in talking to attorney in the middle of that. All those things can be very difficult. The second group, and we like to point out, a lot of people who can't afford legal help in North Carolina are people who do work, so that there's a huge swath of people who work, but they're still considered low income. And as you'll see with some of the projects we do, even if you're not necessarily considered low income, it can be a real luxury to afford an attorney. That's a big jump, that I have enough money to live, but do I have enough money to spend on the expertise of an attorney that can be upward of $500 an hour? There's many people who even make quite a bit of money who still can't afford that. So it's a large swath of people. And then also, and this comes up a lot in the disaster legal services realm, people who are geographically isolated. So the 40 counties with the highest rates of poverty in North Carolina are all rural. So you have the poverty issues and issues that go along with that, with access. But the other type of access issue that happens is that there aren't a lot of attorneys in those areas. And even if there are, they aren't necessarily attorneys who can help with some of these specific issues. So the rural and getting to people in rural areas is a very important part of my work. And it's something that is being talked about nationally quite a bit. I grew up rural, so it's just an interesting personal issue to me too, but it's just something to remember. So the access can mean a lot of things, whether you can financially access something, whether you can physically access something. So think about access as quite a broad issue, and access to justice and access to attorneys in North Carolina. All right, next slide. All right, so here's some more of the big stats. But again, I just want to get in your head, who is it that we're talking about helping and why it's so important? North Carolina has the 13th highest rate of poverty in America. This is all based on a 2017 study, so it might be a little bit different, but it's not good. 2.2 million North Carolinians are eligible to be served by civil legal aid providers. That is about a quarter of our population. The eligibility to be served by those providers is incredibly low. And by low, I mean that their income level is very, very low. It's not, so to have a quarter of our population fall on that, it's not a good thing. And this will tell you below. The average household income for legal aid clients is $12,875 a year. Average household income for a household of 4, that is it. So incredibly poor people, as you can imagine, access to almost anything is difficult. For sure, access to an attorney is not happening. So that's incredibly important. To be eligible for free civil legal aid, a person must generally fall at or below 125% of the poverty level threshold, which is about $30,000 for a family of 4. So that's generally who's eligible for legal aid. If you're above that, you won't be eligible. Next slide, please. All right, so again, but people who can't afford an attorney, aren't they served by legal aid? And we get asked this all the time. And often, yes, they are. And we have incredible legal aid providers in North Carolina. There are 3 large ones. Legal Aid of North Carolina is the largest. There's the Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy and Pisgah Legal Services, which is in Asheville. So those are our 3 largest legal aid providers in the state. But as we showed you, and I'll show you again in a second, so yes, they are doing all they can. And if you get help by them, it is free, it is wonderful. They have great attorneys. If any of you are interested in working at one of those places, I highly encourage it. They are incredible. They're doing incredible work. But, and this is for the next slide. Here are the stats on that. There is only 1 legal aid attorney for almost every 8,000 of those eligible. So not every 8,000 people in North Carolina, but 1 legal aid attorney for every 8,000 people eligible. Of those attorneys, more than 70,000 individuals ask for free civil legal services each year. That's in North Carolina. So 70,000 people are asking them for services, and they are, because of the numbers, because they don't have enough people, more than 35,000 of those have to be turned away purely because lack of capacity. So they're eligible for legal aid services, but legal aid cannot help them. And I'm using legal aid generally for the 3 legal aid providers. So to contrast that, there's 1 attorney in North Carolina for every 357 people, right? So there's just a huge discrepancy and an access issue right there. And then the other really important thing to remember, with those 70,000 people who are asking for help, and this is something that I really implore you to do as you go out into the field, the education piece. Those 70,000 people knew that they had a legal problem and knew who to ask about it. So that is a swath of people. We know that there's a large number of people who don't know that they have a legal problem. And if they do know, or sense that they do, I call it your spidey sense, they know something's up, they might not know who to go to ask for it. Ask for help. So again, 70,000 is going to be a low estimate of how many people really need help. And so these are just very, very important things to remember. And I keep wanting to talk to you about them because I really want you to know who is it that you're helping, because it's extremely important. All right, next slide, please. And this is just from an ABA study. 86% of civil legal needs of people in poverty went unmet. This is in 2017. 71% of all low-income households experience a civil legal problem. And this is without any disaster hitting. This is just day-to-day life. And 25% of low-income households experience 6 or more legal problems. So this is, people need help. I know I keep saying the same thing, but it's extremely important, and I think sets the stage for the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. All right, and this is going to get us into the disaster legal services. So this is just some examples. What are these legal needs? Like, what is it that people are coming to ask for help from legal aid, and then pro bono attorneys are helping? The homelessness and eviction issues, that was something that people had put in the chat. Hurricanes and natural disasters, that's something that we'll talk about in a moment. Protecting parents and their children, domestic violence, huge, huge, huge issue. Accessing benefits for veterans, there's a lot of excellent, oh, and somebody just put in housing, which yes, comes in here, that's a giant issue. Accessing benefits for veterans with service-related injuries. There's a lot of really good pro bono veteran clinics. Clearing dismissed charges or unnecessary fines from a criminal record. So I'm the senior staff attorney at the Resource Center who does all disaster legal services work. My colleague, the other big program that we have is around driver's license restoration and expunction. Her name is Lee Leclerc. And if that's something you're interested in, we have a lot of wonderful programs around that, and I can connect you with her. And then also the last one, again, these are just examples. Providing peace of mind by drafting and executing end-of-life documents. And there were actually several programs as a result of COVID to help people, frontline responders and health workers with this, especially early on as people were nervous about catching in and what would happen, to have all of their documents in order. So again, these are legal needs that are going unmet, and these are legal needs that we have a lot of excellent programming around the states where pro bono attorneys can help and volunteer. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to set the stage. We've got all these, and the one that we're going to focus on, an unmet legal need, are disaster legal services. So again, I'm going to ask a question in the chat of all of you. If you can get ready. Give me an example of what you think it would be an unmet legal need after disaster. There are no wrong answers. They're not necessarily unmet legal need. What's something that someone might need an attorney's help with after a disaster, any kind of disaster? Yep. These are great. You guys are totally hitting the nails on the head. You're awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and keep going if you think of things, but those are all exactly the types of things that that can happen. And this is from the American Bar Association, so I just wanted you to see how they're talking to people and about volunteering. So disasters, both natural and man-made, can result in large populations in immediate need of legal assistance on a number of topics. And often it's difficult to know when a disaster may strike. Legal service providers can have a plan in place to mobilize community attorneys, which is you, the pro bono attorneys, to provide pro bono assistance when necessary. And including volunteer attorneys in the plan will allow the program to provide assistance to more people more quickly and more efficiently. And that's another prong of my work, is just educating people on how attorneys can be part of a disaster recovery plan, because we can and we're good at it. All right, next slide, please. All right, and these are some of those needs that happen after disaster. You guys came up with most of them. Insurance issues. There are all kinds of insurance issues you can imagine. After a hurricane, many homes are destroyed, things like that, loss of property, cars, all those types of issues. New wills, powers of attorney, things like that. One of the things that we focus on in disaster preparedness is making sure that people's paperwork and things like that are together. We found that that's extremely helpful when they're trying to access benefits later. But unfortunately, often papers get destroyed, especially if an entire home gets destroyed, and attorneys can be very, very helpful in helping people replace documents. Home repair contracts and contractors. Consumer fraud is a giant issue after a disaster, and it is something that people need lots and lots of help with. It happens unfortunately, there's some predatory people who will come to a community after a disaster, and you'll have examples of things like a homeowner pays somebody for work to be done and it never happens, or vice versa. They're gouged, all kinds of price gouging, things like that. So those are big issues. And the state of North Carolina is actually very active in that and helpful. The Attorney General's office does a lot of work around consumer fraud. Problems with landlords. So this one, and I'm going to focus on Hurricane Florence. This was an interesting one for me. So generally, you'll have the prototypical problem with a landlord where something has happened, often after a hurricane. The house in some sense is unlivable. It's either wet or there's mold starts growing, things like that. And people will come and tell us that their landlord isn't helping them and they should be. So that happens. But the other thing that happened after Florence, and this was a new one to me, which was interesting, some landlords were coming to people and asking them to leave, citing problems like mold or water, moisture, things like that, when there wasn't a problem. And it turned out what was happening was that the landlord saw an opportunity. There were a lot of people coming into Eastern North Carolina to help. There were FEMA employees, other things like that, and they needed places to live, and there weren't enough places to live. And so landlords saw the opportunity that if they could evict people, they could then charge higher rent to these new people that were coming in. So that was a kind of a reverse problem we hadn't seen before, but an interesting one that people needed help with. The next one is proof of home ownership. That is a huge issue. You might have heard of something called heir property issues, and it's heir, H-E-I-R. You could spend your entire legal career helping people with those. And if that's something you're interested in, we can connect you with programs that are doing pro bono work around that. But that has to do with the situation where land is distributed often within a family over generations without any paperwork following it. And so if there ever comes a time that a person who lives in a house and they own it and they live it, it's their house, needs help, meaning they need benefits from the government and the state to help them after a disaster is often an example of that. They don't have any proof of ownership, and that's required in order to get those benefits, and it can sometimes be very, very difficult to get. So there's a lot of programs that are working on helping rectify and clear title now so that when a disaster strikes, those people are in better shape than they would have been. FEMA appeals, and that's something I'll talk about specifically because we had an excellent project around that. And then now, this year, I've spent an incredible amount of time organizing projects around COVID. And if you told me when I first started in this world of disaster legal services that a global pandemic would be something I'd be working on, I would never imagine anything like it, but I've learned so much, and it's been an incredible experience. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see this well, but this came from Legal Aid of Texas, and they put it together. It's the legal needs, it's a timeline of legal needs following a disaster. And I share this because it's very helpful for us for planning. Every disaster is different. You can't expect it to follow the exact same timeline, but they do have some certain similarities about the issues that come up and when they come up. So when you think about, and a COVID situation aside, but a natural disaster like a fire or a flood or a hurricane, sometimes you know a few days before it's coming, sometimes you don't. But when it initially hits, everyone, including the attorneys, are really focused on basic human needs. Where am I going to go? Where are my children going to go? If I have a pet, where are they going to go? I need the power turned on. I'm trying to, make sure everybody's healthy, find my family. So in that first week, if you're planning an event, that's really not a time to send people to do a clinic or a pro bono event. That's not what people are interested in. It's not meaning to say that the unmet legal needs aren't starting, but it's just not when people are in any sort of headspace to work on that. So just know that hotlines, things like that, that might be more the place to spend your energy. And so one of the things, as I told you before, during those first weeks, if you can get yourself to the place where a hurricane or any sort of natural disaster has happened, we were able to do that after Hurricane Florence by having presence in something called disaster recovery centers, which is something that FEMA sets up in any county that's declared a disaster county. And we had a table that was just an Ask a Lawyer table. We had pro bono volunteers. We managed one of those. The Bar Association did a few. Legal Aid, we all divvied them up. It was great. But if you can have people there just to help educate the public, and like I was talking before, and educating the public means educating the people that it's happening to, and then also the community leaders. So for example, if someone talks to someone at their church, a leader at church, and says, I'm having this very annoying situation with my landlord, I call them, they won't fix this. So from some people that might just sound like an annoyance, but if you can educate people to recognize, use again their spidey sense, do some real life issue spotting, actually that landlord has a legal obligation to you, and this is how you need to trigger that, their duty to do it. There's a certain set of things you might have to give notice, all those types of things. That's where lawyers can really come in and help and educate people. So first of all, to issue spot and know that there is something going on that's a legal issue, and then also to educate the person or to help them and what they need to do next. So that's an extremely important part of our role, and I encourage you to do that your entire lives. If you hear something that sounds suspect and you think it is a legal issue, help people understand that it's a big part of know your rights. All right, next slide, please. All right, and with that, we're going to focus on 3 specific projects that I have been in charge of, all in the disaster legal services realm. Like I said at the end, please feel free to contact me about anything. I have paperwork, I have flyers, I have all kinds of things that go with all of these, and I would share them. You can modify them for any type of project you would ever want to do. The first one that we're going to talk about is our FEMA appeal clinics. All right, next slide. All right, Maurice, so to get us into the headspace about FEMA appeal clinics and about disasters in general, I want to get into your heads money. How much money are we talking about here? It's important because this is what the general public hears about in the news. There is so much money out there, and then they are not getting it. So this is just, I want you to get into that space. So the first poll question, if Maurice would put it up for us. Thank you. Okay, poll question number 1. What was the most expensive in dollars natural disaster in US history? Which one do you think was the most expensive? Setting COVID aside, of all of these, Superstorm Sandy, Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Katrina, or Hurricane Harvey, the most expensive? All right, Maurice, which one's winning?
Right now we have 51 or 57, and Hurricane Katrina is in first place with 40.
All right, you guys are correct. Hurricane Katrina was by far, until COVID, the most expensive disaster that we have had in the US. And now I'm going to go to poll question 2. All right, so we know Katrina was the most expensive. In billions of dollars, how much do you think it cost? And cost is a very generalized term, but how much did it cost the US economy? All right, Maurice, what are people saying?
With 48 votes in, $145 billion is winning.
So actually it was $170 billion is how much Hurricane Katrina cost, from money from the federal government, money from the state. So just for me, almost unfathomable, these amounts, huge. And as you can imagine, for people who are in New Orleans and in Louisiana at the time, they're hearing those kinds of, oh nice, thank you. Hearing those types of numbers, but then feeling on the ground, where is that money? My house needs to be rebuilt and I'm not able to access it. So that is, what is happening and what people are seeing and hearing and what is happening to them. And one of our roles as pro bono attorneys is to try and help them as best we can to access some of that money, because they know it's out there, but where is it? And again, you could probably spend your entire life trying to figure that out. But that I just wanted you to, understand and see. It's really important to think about what people are seeing in the news and hearing, and then what their daily life is like, and the giant disconnect about that. Okay, so you have Hurricane Katrina. For us in North Carolina, it's Hurricane Florence. In September of 2018, Hurricane Florence made landfall in the Carolinas. To date, it is our costliest hurricane, $44 billion in estimated damages. It's one of the 10 costliest in the US, but for us, that we have really, I think, had been 50 or 60 years before since we had seen anything like that. There are parts of the eastern part of the state that were completely cut off for weeks because of flooded roads, things like that, and just tons of sitting water. And so I've got one more poll question for you. So based on all these numbers, so we've got Hurricane Katrina, which is our biggest, $170 billion are spent on that. And my poll question number 3 for you, I'll have Maurice pull it up. Okay. How much do you think FEMA allocated in North Carolina after Hurricane Florence? So this isn't the total cost, so it's a different type of number. But how much do you think was allocated here to help people?
What was 75% of the vote in?
Mm-hmm.
$2 billion.
You guys are right. That is totally correct. That is what FEMA allocated for North Carolina after Hurricane Florence. And we're going to talk about through 2 projects. So that was the amount allocated, how long it took to get here, and where it is. Those are whole other questions, and we're going to talk about that for a little bit. All right. So the next slide, please. Okay, so Hurricane Florence hits the eastern part of the state. There are 34 counties designated as disaster areas, federal disaster areas. And there are 34 then of these disaster recovery centers set up in eastern North Carolina. We had never seen anything like that. That was by far the biggest swath and largest geographic area something like this had hit. We, the Pro Bono Resource Center, manned in New Bern, North Carolina, a legal assistance table at the DRC there. And like I said, I also helped at one in Fayetteville. And then there were ones in all the other 34 counties that were set up by the Bar Association and Legal Aid. And we all worked on that together. And at the DRC's pro bono attorneys answered questions about anything that you could imagine. They were open to the public, and all those different issues that we talked about, we had people answering questions. And that was just a Q&A. People weren't experts, they just were doing the best, some brief advice and counsel. But one of the things that kept coming up at these DRCs is that people were applying for FEMA for benefits. FEMA was physically at the DRC. You could go there and apply for benefits. People were applying for benefits and being denied. Or given less than they thought they should be. And so those were called FEMA denials. And so as the slide says, for example, in New Hanover County, which is Wilmington, residents filed more than 12,000 requests for FEMA assistance, so applications to FEMA, that were denied. So 12,000 FEMA denials. That's not how many applied, but denials. Only 95 of those denials were appealed. So once people got denied, they stopped. And that was something that we thought pro bono attorneys could really help people do that next step. It's, mine can be mind-numbing, that kind of type of paperwork, but we thought it would be a perfect thing for pro bono attorneys to do. And so before I talk about that project specifically, I want to show you our first video. This is a video we did in conjunction with the North Carolina Bar Association, where they interviewed some of our attorneys and clients who were at the pro bono clinics, at these FEMA appeal clinics. And I think it gives you a good idea of who we're talking about and the kind of help that they needed.
Florence was different because it was on top of us.
Our house was totally devastated.
It was a nightmare. Everybody called our neighborhood ground zero because it was just the hardest hit. The house had 10-foot exterior watermarks on the outside of the house, and we measured about 62 inches inside. The house was completely knocked off of the foundation, so it started sinking in the ground. And in December, they tore our house down, and we are getting close to finishing our house. We're supposed to be in July. I used to call it the nightmare that won't end, but it's looking better now.
A lot of the houses around us, people are already living in them again. We're not in them yet. And then we had almost 7 feet of water in the garage.
Roughly.
Wow. It seems like it just happened yesterday at times, and then at times it seems like there's been so much time that's going on, but nothing's happened. It's almost like we're in a suspended time because we can't get in our house. You can't get anybody to give you direct answers, or when they give you answers, they're not the right answers.
I saw that the Bar Association was doing some pro bono work at the Disaster Recovery Center where FEMA and all the other folks were located. So myself and another attorney in our office signed up. Something as devastating as this, where everyone is running around, with no clue of what they're going to do and how they're going to rebuild their lives. I think anything that you can do to help people like that is positive.
But for the attorneys to take their time to work with people pro bono and to not make you feel rushed and to just take the time to walk you through step by step and make sure that you got it is like the best feeling in the world.
So I encourage every lawyer out there to treat disasters and opportunities like this as your opportunity.
It makes you feel like you're important to somebody.
I know it made a difference to me to be able to even talk to other people that were going through it as well. I thought it was therapeutic to me as well. So I'm sure that it helped those people. I hope it did.
Thanks, Maurice. Now we're, yeah, ready back for the PowerPoint. And so the attorneys that were in those videos are people who volunteered for us both at the DRCs and at the appeal clinics, and then the clients were actual clients that we helped, and I'm going to show you some more pictures of that. Thanks. Okay. So now we'll talk specifically about these FEMA appeal clinics. So as I said, after the work at the DRCs, it became clear that people really needed help with their FEMA appeals. And so what does it all mean? What is a FEMA appeal clinic? I started saying that we were going to do them, not really fully understanding what that meant. And this was something I had not organized before. It was for people who were impacted by Hurricane Florence and denied benefits by FEMA or had gotten smaller benefit amount than what they thought they should. What? Clinics to help survivors with these FEMA appeals, and they were going to be run by us, the Pro Bono Resource Center, in collaboration with legal aid, and then also, and manned though by pro bono attorneys. Where to have them. And this made this project unique. I was looking for examples of it when I was setting it up to see examples of where people went to actually the area where the disaster happened to have clinics like this, and I couldn't find any. The disaster that really that I knew about that catalyzed a lot of pro bono attorneys was Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, but Hurricane Maria completely devastated Puerto Rico, the entire infrastructure. So you really couldn't do any legal services in Puerto Rico. So most of them were done remotely, which turned out to be an excellent example of what we ended up needing to do now with COVID. But for this, we were only a few hours away and we could go there. And so we decided to do on-site legal clinics, which made this a little bit different and I think was part of the reason it was so successful. We chose 4 places to do them, and we talked with legal aid about the counties that were most impacted of those 34, most impacted meaning most numbers of people with denials, so that we could go there to help. It didn't mean that other ones didn't need help, and they were open to anyone, so you didn't have to live in those counties to come, but we tried to spread ourselves out in a way that would make us accessible, like we talked about earlier with the rural geography issue and accessibility, so to really bring ourselves to the people. And then when we did them in winter after Hurricane Florence hit, there is a short timeline that you can do these FEMA appeals. So that was important too, to make sure that people knew they only had a certain amount of time. You can argue some extenuating circumstances to get an extension, and that's one of the things that some of the attorneys did, but you really do have to talk about it in the appeal. So it's important that people knew about that timeline. And then why? This is giant unmet legal need. Like we talked about, you saw only 95 people appealed their denials in New Hanover County. That's crazy. And we knew that we could help people. So we brought attorneys there. And this is another thing that I would like to hit home to you, and just hope that if you're going to leave here with one thing, with your legal education and your legal training, you now have a new skill set, and you're going to hone it your entire career. And one of the things that you're incredibly good at is crafting a narrative that will speak to a decision maker. This is incredibly important. You're going to do it in court when you're arguing to a judge. You're going to do it in writing when you're arguing again to a judge, or maybe to an opposing counsel, to a government agency when you're asking for benefits. This is something that you know how to do. And this is something that these people needed help with. So a few things to remember. They're coming to you, FEMA denial. What they're saying happened to them, generally it did. So that's, we're not working on, are we talking about the truth? But this really did happen to them, and they should qualify for these benefits. They're going to tell you a story where every single part of it is important to them, as it should be, because it was devastating. They are trauma victims. They've dealt with something incredibly hard and are still dealing with it. And what you can do is listen to that story, cull down that narrative. You know what the denial looks like. You have the letter there, so you know on what grounds it was denied. Sometimes it's difficult to figure that out, but and you know the law. And so then you can take the story that was told to you, pick out the parts that are important for making a different decision happen, and then create a letter or a document for this person where it's then, as I said, crafts their narrative in a way that's going to speak to this decision maker, and hopefully the decision maker will make a decision to benefit them. And I think that is something that we all have, and you need to remember that you have it, because it's a superpower that you should be so proud of. Basically, you're able to cut out the noise, the other extenuating facts that are in a story that are very important to the person telling it, but won't necessarily be important to the decision maker. And that is what was happening at these FEMA appeal clinics. And it was wonderful. So I can't hit that home enough. It's extremely important to me, and should be important to you that you have that skill set. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this is where we did our events, and just wanted to give you some of the numbers. They were wonderful. It was just, to say that they were fun, they really were. We had great volunteers. A few of the things that we did that made these extremely successful, and again, please steal every single one of these ideas because they worked well. Partnering with community colleges. We held all of these events at community colleges, and I cannot tell you how important that was for them. It was a game changer when we figured out to do that. The space was donated to us, and it was a game changer on many fronts. One being that for the clients who were coming, they knew that this was a legitimate event. They trust their local community colleges. A lot of things during the hurricane had come from community colleges, both information and help, so it was a place that they found trustworthy and generally centrally located in these communities. They have parking, they have room, they have all the things you need to have a good event, which was great. And they had space for us. They were just wonderful. And one of the stories I like to tell is when we were scheduling our first event, the way that we were doing this is the attorney would meet with a client, and then the client would leave with a printed out version of their FEMA appeal that they then would mail in pro se. The representation ended when they left the clinic. So I was trying to figure out how to get these things printed. You know, do we bring our own printers? Do we have everybody have a laptop? Just trying to think out those logistics because we had quite a few people coming to these clinics. And at the Cape Fear Community College, I was talking to the woman in charge of us trying to figure that out, you know, about internet, what did we need? And she asked me exactly like, how are we trying to run this? And I said it to her, what I just said to you. And she said, well, then you need to be in the computer lab. That would make the most sense. There's computers there for everybody. There are printers and light bulb. She's totally right. That's exactly where we needed to be. It was, again, another game changer. Everybody had a computer to work on, easy printing. And the one thing that we did, because it was all donated, we did spend some money on from my grant was to have an IT person from the community college there the day of the event, because as we all know, if something's going to go wrong, it's going to be the IT. And this was so computer and printer dependent. We needed those to work. And again, another game changer just by having, you know, talking out what you're trying to do with somebody who works in the place, and they had some great ideas. So that was wonderful. Every event started with a Know Your Rights session. So everybody would come. If you had an appointment with an attorney, I was managing all the appointments and the attorneys. If you had an appointment with an attorney, you had to come to a Know Your Rights event. And that had two purposes. One, so that the client went into the meeting with some knowledge about what they were going to be talking about. But then also it culled out some people. Some people went to the Know Your Rights session and realized that this actually wasn't what they needed, or they didn't qualify. So that was good for that too. And then you went to a waiting room and waited for your meeting with your attorney. We had a subject matter expert on site who was there as a resource for the attorneys, so if they needed help. And we had trained all the attorneys prior to the event. We had a lot of training materials for them to look at beforehand. And then if we had law student volunteers, they would partner with the attorneys, and that worked out really well. They learned a lot. We had a few events with quite a few law students. And then, so we had four of these scheduled. And then if you look the last one in Trenton, North Carolina, that's Jones County, which is one of the poorest counties in North Carolina. That event came to be because someone came to our event at New Bern, was so impressed and had such a good experience, asked us to come and do one in Trenton. So then we scheduled an extra one there. So that's just a basic overview of what was going on at these events. And let me tell you one other story. And these are just to make you understand that as you are planning your own pro bono events, you will hit little roadblocks, but you can get over them, and it's worth talking to people, like the computer lab story. So for New Bern, I had that event scheduled. I had all of our attorneys volunteered, place to have it, everything. What I did not have was any clients, and I started to freak out. So I had done all kinds of advertising, trying to figure out, you know, where are they? And I was on a walk with my husband telling him how worried I was. And he looked at me and he said, you need to reach out to the largest employers in the area, and they can help you get the word out. So I went home, figured out the largest employers in the area, and I called them the lists of people who have lists. That you need people who have lists of people, and they did. And largest employer in New Bern was the local public schools, a hospital system, and Walmart. I reached out and said that it was open to their employees, friends of their employees, families, anyone who might have this need. And within 24 hours, it was filled up. So if you're ever trying to find clients, I really, really, really recommend going through employers. It was a great idea and was not mine. So I share it with everyone. All right, next slide, please. All right, so these are just some pictures from you from some of these, the FEMA appeal clinics. If you look on the left, those were our our paralegal volunteers who were totally fantastic. Could not have run these events without them. They did all the check-in and intake. On the right is a picture from one of the Know Your Rights sessions, somebody asking questions. And in the middle, that is a couple who was meeting with an attorney and I believe a law student. And the next slide. These are some more of our volunteers. On the top left is Leslie Albritton, who's an attorney with Legal Aid in North Carolina. She served as a subject matter expert for us at many of our events. She was great. Below her are clients meeting with attorneys. And then on the right, we had, when we were in Morehead City, a huge group of law students came, and that was all of them with the volunteers. And we had enough law students to partner one with each attorney volunteers, and they had a great experience. It was wonderful. And I don't know if you can see behind them, but that community college is on the water, and they had themselves, the community college building, incredible damage after Hurricane Florence. And then the next slide. All right, so this slide is always really important to me, because in this disaster legal services work, I don't want you to forget who it is you're helping. Like, when it all boils down to it, it's people. And we had a photographer who volunteered his time at our events to document them, and he started talking to one of the clients, and they invited him to come to their home in New Bern to take pictures. So this is at the time we were doing the New Bern FEMA Appeal Clinic. This was the state of their home. It had been destroyed by Hurricane Florence. They were living in it, and they had been unable to get any sort of government benefits or help, and that's what we were able to help them do. But you can see, you know, the windows are boarded up, they have tarps, and this is how they were living. So just to remember that these are people you're helping, and they really, really need help. And with that, I'm going to show you one more video about the work at the FEMA Appeal Clinics.
Just a couple of days before Florence hit, it was gorgeous out. And just seeing the kind of devastation it can cause and how many lives it can affect it's really humbling. It wasn't necessarily as much wind destruction as there have been in other hurricanes, but just the water damage. And I mean, it sat over this whole area for 3 days, just dumping water. Wow, look at all this. There's one neighborhood in Hampstead called Cross Creek. Everybody had all their stuff pulled out. And just knowing that these people didn't have anywhere to go, it was nothing like I've ever seen before.
We were able to kind of pull up the bootstraps. But when you talk about the vibrancy of the community, we're just getting back because there's so many homes destroyed. But, you know, thanks to the clinic, help is coming.
I really wanted to do whatever I could to help. You know, these people who have been through these disasters like this, they just, you know, they don't know where else to turn. Some of the people that I spoke to, I mean, they don't have the money for an attorney. They don't have the knowledge of what kind of resources are out there.
In an emergency situation like a hurricane, Legal Aid of North Carolina simply cannot meet the needs of everyone impacted by a storm. And after Florence, volunteers helped by taking cases pro bono, by staffing one of the hotlines that we used, and by attending clinics where they help people on site.
The nice thing about the Disaster Recovery Center and the FEMA Appeal Clinics is it's a specific structure that's already in place. So you have training on how to do the work, you have clients who are set up to meet with you, and it's such an easy way to give your time.
I went from 3 denials to we're processing your application and we'll talk to you about it.
You know, we were so down right after this happened, and to be able to take those steps and see those small changes, it was a great feeling. I'm glad I was part of it.
We rely on volunteers to help us get the work done and to serve as many people as we possibly can.
And I think that that's our job, is that we need to educate the public, let them know what resources are available, and do whatever we can to help at no cost.
We need you. We absolutely do. Having that workshop and that my particular attorney changed the game for me.
Thank you. Whenever I hear the one client say about, you know, that she went from denial to we're processing your application, it gives me chills, just because that's the work that you all can be doing too, and that we can be doing as volunteers, which is great. All right, so the next 2 projects I'm going to talk about, one is called Rebuild North Carolina, and I will go through this one a little bit quickly because it relates to the FEMA appeals, and then focus on the COVID-19 project. But like I said, I apologize, I'm long-winded and do not want you to have to sit longer than you need to. But Rebuild North Carolina was a project, it was a joint project, or is a joint project, it's still going on, that I'm managing between ourselves and Legal Aid of North Carolina. And this came to be as the world was shutting down because of COVID. We had gotten together, our appeals clinics and other work that we had done had been very successful and very fruitful in developing relationships between ourselves and all the other legal service providers and other nonprofits in North Carolina and some state agencies. So we have some really excellent relationships now. And one of the things that we had wanted to do based on the FEMA appeal work, where we saw that a lot of people didn't have paperwork in order to get their FEMA benefits, was to help people do that ahead of time. So we had planned these, we called them disaster preparedness roadshows. And we were going to the eastern part of the state to do presentations. And the next day there would be fairs where you could come, the general public could come in and talk to any of these organizations and get help. So that was all being planned in March of 2020 when the world shut down. So we were not going to be able to do that. I thought we'd reschedule it for June. It became clear that that wasn't going to happen. And so as that's happening, I'm starting to work on a COVID project, which I will talk to you about next. But at the same time, North Carolina releases its money for people who are Hurricane Florence survivors. All right, so remember, Hurricane Florence hit in 2018. It's our most devastating storm. Money starts being available from the state of North Carolina in April 2020. The application opened in June, so almost 2 years later. So people are sitting, they have not had the help needed that they need. Some people have, but they should get reimbursed for it. So Legal Aid of North Carolina approached us about partnering on a project where they would do intakes to help people do these applications. Rebuild is the program through the state. But then if somebody came to them and wasn't eligible for legal aid for whatever reason, but they thought still did need help from an attorney and wouldn't be able to afford one, they would then funnel those people to us. And that's the first time we've done a direct referral program like that with legal aid, and it was great, and it has been great. And as like I said, there's still some of these are still open. So it was $542 million that was allocated to North Carolina by Congress for this program. So a lot of money. And again, we talk about this, people see those amounts in the newspaper and on the news and want to know how to access it. So this was about helping people do just that. So the project mimicked those FEMA appeals clinics, but it was remote. So that was different. You know, like everybody else, we were figuring out how to get to and do this work remote. But it made for some nice changes. So instead of having to come to an appeals clinic on the day that it was, and that's the only day that we could do it, and we really couldn't get you help outside of that, these meetings didn't have to be on a certain day or at a certain time. The attorney and the client could figure out what worked best for them. And that's been a nice lesson to learn for me for future projects. There's something very good about giving that flexibility to people, that a clinic can be something that is in a single day. We did outreach, and then people, like I said, reached out to legal aid, and then they gave us the referrals, and then we did another intake, PBRC. One of the interesting notes is we give people all the alternatives. They can meet with you by Zoom, by FaceTime, whatever you would like, but people tend to want to meet by phone. Our clients are phone people, and that's what they're comfortable with. So it's just another interesting thing to remember, that phones were the way to go. And then this is what was expected of a volunteer. And I give this example to tell you about the project, but also as an example when you are running your own projects, that it's really important to make sure that both your volunteers and your clients understand what they're signing up for and what's expected of them. So this one was 3 hours of one-on-one time with a pro bono client. They could do it any way they wanted to, and the time could be split into any type of time that made sense for them. It could be 3 1-hours, a half an hour here, whatever made sense, but we wanted to be done within 2 weeks of that initial meeting. That turned out for a lot of people, I always give this types of guidance because I want it to happen quickly, but sometimes that's impossible. We have cases that are still going because they're trying to gather documents or are working with the state. So as long as things are still happening, I'm totally okay with that. Prior to the launch of the project, I did several training sessions. So our attorneys were all trained. I take care of all that, and they're ready on the law and how to do the rebuild applications. And one of the important things, like I said before, that this was a longer term representation than the appeal clinic, not necessarily the total numbers of hours worked, but the temporal time that you were doing it. So managing the expectations of both the volunteers as far, when we wanted them to do things, and then the clients as far as what they were getting, that was really, really important. All right, so this is a slide I share, and this is a slide I share for every project that I do. And it's extremely important, and I ask you as attorneys and law students to do this in your daily practice, both in pro bono and then when you're working with clients. So the first thing is to be helpful and creative with your pro bono client. You know, don't get stuck. Your first answer shouldn't be no. Listen to what they have to say and I often say, like, think of your absolute favorite relative coming to you for help. Like, really be creative and kind in a way that you would be to them. And it's really important. Each client's going to come to the project and come to you with different needs and readiness. So I'm going to generalize here, but I often tell people in these projects that the world is divided into two people, not just these pro bono clients, but I'm going to say generally the world. And there are the people who have every important document that they need in a folder, and they know where it is. We all know people like that. Then there's the other half of the world, people like myself, who know that there are important documents. I know that they're somewhere. It might take me a little while to get them for you, and probably a few of them are missing. And so, and that is where I am. And your clientele are going to be everywhere in between. I don't know if you noticed in that second video, there was a gentleman who came to us who had just a plastic bag of every piece of paper he'd ever had, and that was his organizational system. There's nothing, wrong with that, but that's what you have in front of you. So you need to know that that's what you're working with, and don't get angry about it. Just know that that's how it is, and there's all different types of people. So that's really important. And the other thing is to meet people. This is important with your clients, very important with pro bono clients. Meet them where they are, and the biggest goal is just to move them a little bit forward. This is unbelievably important to me. These are words that I live by, these rules for any pro bono project that we do. The thing to remember, these clients, when they come to you, they have heard no more times than you can imagine. They have had more unreturned phone calls than you can imagine. They've had more doors slammed in their face. And I am insistent, and I am dedicated to the belief that we are not going to be part of that problem. No project that I organize will be part of that problem, and no project that you organize should ever be part of that problem. You will call people back. You will be in contact. And understand, on the other side, they might not call you back. That's fine, but that doesn't mean that you don't call them back. And that your goal is to move the ball forward, even just a teeny, teeny, teeny bit. And it's really important at the end of any project that the client leaves knowing, understanding what the project might not be done, their issue might not be solved, but they need to know what is their next step and how to do it. And that is really, really, really important. It's important to me, and I think it's our duty to these clients. And so I want to make sure that I spoke about that because it's so important to me. So this was I wanted to show you, this was the flyer that we had for the rebuild project. And it's one of those things you'll see people get nervous. People get nervous about attorneys in general, like, are we being predatory, or do we want something from them? So if you can have, legal aid or pro bono resource center, an organization that people know is legitimate, it can be helpful. But people still call, and some people don't call because they're nervous, but we do the best we can with with our advertising. Flyers are really good so that people can share them. Facebook is a huge way that this information gives around. There's different community groups, and it seems to be still Facebook that they're using. But anytime that you can spread the word on any project as much as possible. And whenever I send it anywhere, I tell people they can share it with anyone and everyone. They're private and professional networks. Just get the word out, because that's often what you're trying to do. All right, so the After Rebuild project. Now we're going to go on to the COVID-19 business nonprofit project. So again, I'm going to set the stage for where we were. This is the third project we'll talk about today. This is my biggest project going on right now. And to set the stage for it, it's March 2020, and COVID is a thing. We are starting to understand that we're going home and not totally sure when we'll be coming back to work. On the left, you can see those disaster road shows that I had planned. We had to tell everybody that they were postponed, but we had put a lot of time into those. And those are the organizations I partnered with to do them. And so there was that. So there was turning those into something virtual, which we did, into training sessions. At the same time, realizing there's this whole new disaster coming, and I'm a disaster legal services person, and we probably need to do some pro bono around it. So at the beginning of this project, I had a lot of law firms coming to me and asking and wanting to do things. And like all of you, I was also trying to figure out how to work at home and what I needed to do. So there was just a lot going on. And so I'm going to go to the next slide. We had firms come to us, and these are firms we partner with a lot, and you probably recognize quite a few of them. They're large national law firms. So what I started having them do in March, April, and May was to write white papers for us on different legal issues as they related to COVID. And we could use those when people had questions. We had different organizations asking us things, and it was just a good way to harness this energy that was there, that people wanted to do pro bono, but we didn't really know what to have them do beyond that type of thing. So that was what we did at first. At the same time, one of the firms came to us and asked if we wanted to partner on a project that was coming out of New York City with an organization called Lawyers for Good Government about this COVID-19 small business nonprofit project. And we weren't sure, but it sounded great. So we started sitting in meetings. We sat in on meetings from Lawyers for Good Government. We sat in on meetings of all these law firms together, which you can imagine when you get all these law firms together, them trying to whittle down what the rules are going to be around a project, because there's a lot of attorneys. Took some time. So we were lots and lots of meetings. But then we were all just really impressed with what it was that they were doing and what Lawyers for Good Government had come up with. So we began a series of trainings, got ready to do this, started putting together trainings for the attorneys that were going to volunteer, and then some outreach materials for small businesses and nonprofits who might need these services. And then all these firms were signed on to the project too. And I will give you a little bit more at the next slide with the delineation of what the jobs were. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so the purpose of this clinic, it was an opportunity for North Carolina small businesses and nonprofits who had a COVID-related issue. It had to be COVID-related, still does have to be COVID-related. Receive 45 minutes of free legal advice, remote consultation with a volunteer attorney. So a few things to remember, the attorneys that we are talking about with this project are from these large firms. They charge upward of $500 an hour. So the idea, more than likely, that these small businesses and nonprofits could ever get one of these people as their attorney was pretty slim. And the other thing that was really interesting is that they are subject matter experts. So as opposed to the Hurricane Florence where we're training people, because really and truly, especially at the beginning of Florence, there was no such thing as a FEMA appeal expert. There are now because they've done so many, but that wasn't really a thing. It was, how to appeal a government decision. So we were training people on that. But with this, we decided we really wanted to hone in on attorneys who already had subject matter experts for the subject matter expertise for the different issues, and then partner up these small businesses and nonprofits with them. So that's how we did this one, and which was a big difference for us. And all kinds of issues. We'll talk about the issues that they hit. But at the beginning was a lot of CARES Act, PPP, how to access different government benefits. And so we were in charge of the Pro Bono Resource Center of getting clients. So I did an incredible amount of outreach to clients. I did news interviews, newspaper things, stuff like that, getting clients to know about this, contacting chambers of commerce and different groups. And then the law firms were in charge of the actual organizing their attorneys. And then each law firm had a volunteer paralegal who did the partnering of the attorney with the project. So everybody was working. And again, it's still going on. I'll give you the statistics on it. It's been an amazing project. All right, so the client base, who are the clients? Lawyers for Good Government said that we could determine what small business and small nonprofit meant. And we decided in North Carolina it was going to be anyone with less than 25 employees. In some states, they went with more economic and financial criteria. You had to make less than a certain amount, things like that. But we decided to start with the less than 25 because we thought that would cover most. I've done a lot of research on small businesses and nonprofits. It would cover a lot of who we wanted to get the word out to. And we thought we could deal with the numbers. And so far we have been able to. We knew if we were deluge, we might have to limit it with other criteria, but we haven't needed to. And generally these are, entrepreneurs, small businesses, restaurants, stores, things like that. A lot of them haven't worked with an attorney before. And when COVID came, suddenly they were overwhelmed by what was going on, amount of paperwork, decisions that they needed to make, and they really needed help. So the clinic model is an easy one, very replicable. Again, I can share it with anyone. They fill out an initial screening form on our website. I go through it. If it's not clear that it's a COVID-related question, I reach back out. If it's not a COVID-related question, often I try and find them another resource. If it is, we put them back in. And then the project administrators on the law firm side match the attorney with the project, and we monitor the progress of that along with the paralegals. One of the things that we were able to get from Lawyers for Good Government for this project is normally my case management system is Excel. And we're a pretty scrappy organization with not a lot of money, so I have to do things very, very much, on the simple. And with this, what came with this project that was given to us was a beautiful case management system that I hadn't really gotten to work with before, and that's been great. It's been a much easier way to manage these projects, and it's something that I will utilize in the future. All right, so these are just clinic model and process, and go with those same tenets I told you before. The volunteer must reach out to the client within 24 hours. They do a 45-minute consultation. They do research, gather facts, give that information to them all over the phone or Zoom. And at the end, they do a post-meeting report for us, just so I have some understanding of what happened during that meeting. So it's been very simple. People are extremely helpful and happy with the results of that. So these are the big issues that are coming up. And like I said, this project is still full-blown, still going. Relief programs, contracts, lots of things at the beginning if you needed to cancel an event, how you do that without losing a lot of money. Employment, there were some excellent questions from small businesses and nonprofits about how to, for example, furlough employees in a way that the employee could still take advantage of benefits. People were just trying to be extremely careful, which was great. There are a lot of issues about liability. If we open back up and somebody gets COVID, what kind of requirements do we need to have, things like that. insurance questions, commercial leases, helping a lot of people rework their lease because they didn't have the money to pay it. So a lot of, the things that you would have thought would be problems. And then unfortunately now we're getting more bankruptcy and dissolution, which is a problem. There's, going to be businesses that just can't come back after a year of this, which is always hard to see. And so bankruptcy is one where we've recruited some really subject matter experts because it's extremely important to have people who know what they're talking about when they're advising someone on bankruptcy. So I did this last week, but we're actually up to 200 clients to date. So it's 192 clients, 75 attorneys and 10 paralegals. We estimate, and this is on the way low, that everybody's volunteering 1.5 hours for each case that they do. I think that's very, very low, but it's almost 300 hours. And that was, like I said, 2 weeks ago. And the lowest amount anybody charges is $500. So that's like incredibly valuable project. And then the paralegals are in charge, like I said, of the administrative end, and they are unreal. I encourage everyone to include volunteer paralegals in any project that you do. They're unbelievable. And this is just if you're interested in how it sort of broke down. So 3/4 of them have been small businesses, 25% who've come to us have been nonprofits. That's been interesting. Majority of the questions around loans and grants, and there's new loans and grants that are coming out now, so that's happening again. So how to access government benefits, once again, which is similar to the FEMA and rebuild. So you're seeing that reoccurring theme in the pro bono world around disaster recovery. And then it splits up, all the other issues, labor, commercial leases, things like that. But I just thought it was interesting to see what types of questions people were asking. And then these are some of the client testimonials. So just for you to see, like when you volunteer, what is it the clients are saying and what's important? Clear answers, options, and legal assistance. The experience was excellent, got the answer exactly what I needed to know. It's just this idea that if you talk to an attorney for 45 minutes and you have, even for example, a choice of 5 things that you need to be doing, you know that, you've gotten all the paperwork, but you have no idea what the order is to do it, and an attorney can help guide you through that, that is invaluable. So just the things that you can bring to the table with this, your newly found education, are amazing, and I just hope that you'll use them, as I say, for the power of good, and even small bites of them can be extremely helpful to people. And then I want to, before I just give you a quick overview of how to find projects on our website, but we're going to share this PowerPoint with all of you, or I'll send it to Maurice in a shareable form so you'll have all this information. But I just would like to close out today with a final, it's a news clip about a business in Raleigh that was helped by this project. And again, just to remind you, you're helping real people when you do this work and why it's so important.
Every resolution starts with the right routine and the right equipment, like Casper's ergonomically supportive Wave Hybrid mattress.
Slowly lifting as vaccinations increase, but many small COVID restrictions are slowly lifting as vaccinations increase, but many small businesses are still struggling as they try to navigate things like loans, liability, and leases. But as WCNC Charlotte's Savannah Levin shows us, there is free help available for local business owners asking, where's the money?
The North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center is connecting lawyers with small businesses for free, hoping to help keep them afloat.
It was a pretty rough year for us.
Asia Sheikh owns a local indoor rec facility with a group of friends, aptly named Friends Pavilion. They built a thriving business, but when COVID hit, so did harsh reality.
It was quite a learning curve for us because, to be honest, we are the first-time business owners. So many things were like a shock to us. We had no clarity what's going on. We had landlords coming behind us with all the legal terminologies, which we had no idea what they are talking about. No loans getting approved, no relief coming to us.
Eventually, she heard the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center is offering free legal advice to nonprofits and small businesses with less than 25 employees.
I got immediate response from them. She helped us understand the entire lease. She advised us to go through some of the loan procedures. They came to our life as an angels because we were totally devastated.
So we started in May. We actually today just hit our 200th client.
Catherine Asaro is a senior staff attorney for the Pro Bono Center.
To afford an attorney is a very expensive, indulgence for a lot of people. Everyone knows that small businesses, nonprofits are the backbone of, of our economy, of our state. So the attorneys really wanted to help.
Asaro says they're helping businesses navigate things like loan applications, lease disputes, liability requirements, insurance, and more.
And then unfortunately, we started getting more and more about dissolution and bankruptcy. There are some benefits that are available to them or different sources of income and funding to help. But to know what those are, that's almost a full-time job.
For many business owners like Sheikh, the program was a saving grace.
If this business clinic would not have been there, then I don't see where we would be sitting. I think we need to share this with more people.
And so to have that conversation and to really, really help guide people in the right direction, it can be invaluable and could be the difference between a business surviving right now and not.
There's a simple application small businesses and nonprofits can fill out to request this help. We've linked to it on WCNC.com. Reporting for WCNC Charlotte, I'm Savannah Levins. Back to you.
Thanks. All right, so I just want to first of all thank you all for your time. This is an hour and 15 minutes, which I know is a little longer than was planned, and I really appreciate it. As you can see, this work is my passion, and I love it. And it might sound strange to say that I enjoy things around disasters, but so clearly I don't enjoy the disaster. But the help that we can give people and that we're equipped to give people is joy, and it is an honor. And it's one that I hope that you will really latch on to. And I want to leave you with this up. So first of all, the few slides that we went through, those have information which you can find on our website too about how to find different pro bono projects. So in addition to the disaster legal services, we are also a clearinghouse of projects around the state, and there's all kinds of things going on. And also here's my contact information, which Maurice will share with you if you have any questions or want any help or being connected with a project, or if I can help you set up a project, I would love to do that. I'm good at doing all those things. And I just want to leave you as law students and professors and whomever else is in the audience with this thought. When society confers the privilege to practice law on an individual, he or she accepts the responsibility to promote justice and to make justice equally accessible to all people. Thus, all lawyers should aspire to render some legal services without fee or expectation of fee for the good of the public. And this is often the preamble to Rule 6.1, which encourages us to do pro bono work. But I really, really hope that you'll consider it. As I said, it's one of your superpowers. You've got a new set of skills that should be shared. And it really was an honor to be here today. And I'm so excited that you're talking about disaster legal services because it's a really interesting and important area of law. So thank you.
Thank you. I know you all will join me, ladies and gentlemen, in thanking Ms. Asara for that timely, comprehensive, and valuable presentation and this resource. So thank you. And thank you again to the audience for joining us today as well. And again, as she said, I will furnish this PowerPoint to you and the recorded link. So thank you all for being here, and thank her again for meeting us here at Winston-Salem virtually and moving us just a little bit forward, because here at Wake Forest, community engagement is one of our chief responsibilities, and we take it very seriously, so we thank you.